Yeah, the death of the cookie is a hot topic in the industry right now. It's something that clients are increasingly concerned about and looking to learn more about. I'm proud to say that we've been pretty far out in front of this from a leadership perspective. So we started an initiative called Future Signals last year. And the idea is that, well, let's not just look at cookies, because cookies are just one signal that we use to target our campaigns. Let's look at what lies in store for all the different signals in the marketplace. So for example, last year, Apple rolled out something called App Tracking Transparency. That limited the availability of a signal called IDFA, which most people had never even heard of, right? Everyone was just thinking about cookies. But then that had a huge impact on the performance of certain campaigns with certain publishers. For example, a lot of our Facebook CPA, cost per action campaigns, saw their performance decline markedly with that change. So anyway, the point is that cookies are not the only signal to pay attention to. You have to look at the signal space holistically, especially if you're a major advertiser, as our clients tend to be, that are activating across a variety of channels. And so we've done 5 of these Future Signals presentations. We're doing them on a quarterly cadence. And the reception from our client base and teams has really been great, because we're not just talking about, oh, well, here's what these signals are and here's what these changes mean. We also say, here are mitigation strategies that you can employ. Like, okay, you no longer have access to this data. Well, we can proxy for it. We can model for it. We can do an analysis that spans across multiple cleanroom environments. So it's this combination of education about the problem and then being very solutions oriented about how to address it.
So talking about solutions in particular, one of the solutions that's been presented for both the buy side and the sell side are ID solutions.
Yeah.
And user IDs.
Right.
How is Omnicom thinking about testing and evaluating those IDs? And also, how can you advise the sell side about which of those IDs they might want to test?
It's a great question, because everyone's looking for a new persistent ID that can succeed the cookie. No one wants to go back to a world where ads just aren't really targeted outside of context, right? We still want to be able to identify individuals, or at least group them into cohorts so that we can reach them. So in terms of our approach, first of all, we have come out. We were the first agency holding company to publicly endorse UID 2.0. That doesn't mean that's the only one that we like. We work with all of the different addressable media identifiers that are floating around there. So we work with Neustar Fabric ID. We work with LiveRamp's Ramp ID. And what's nice about these new ID standards is they tend to interoperate with each other, so you don't just have to pick one. So really what we're trying to do right now isn't so much focus on testing on the buy side, because right now the scale isn't there in the marketplace. We're only seeing single-digit percentages of bid requests that come in, meaning like the inventory that we see put up for auction in the programmatic landscape. Only a single-digit percentage of that carries one of these new identifiers with it. That is, to put it delicately, subscale for our clients' needs. So actually, a big focus of ours right now is driving adoption on the publisher side, right? Because if publishers aren't broadcasting these new ID signals, if they don't have them integrated, well, then we can't target on that basis, right? So we're doing that. We're working closely with the trade desk because they've got an initiative called OpenPass. And basically it's an ID onboarder to make it easier for publishers to generate these new ID signals for us to use. Beyond that, we're also testing and learning with Google. So Google has a completely different approach. It used to be called Flocks. Now it's called Topics. Maybe it'll be called something else in 6 months or a year. But anyway, the idea is that instead of trying to replicate a one-to-one identifier like a cookie, because UID or Ramp ID is supposed to be a one-to-one replacement, right? It's like one identifier per one user. Google's concept is, forget that, we'll just compute people's browsing behavior in Chrome and then package people up into cohorts. That was the C in Flocks back when that was still the term of art. And then we'll bucket people into 350 unique topics, and you'll be able to target people in those topics based on their browsing behavior. It's a totally different approach to targeting. We're also testing that. So basically, we're testing and learning not just in the one-to-one ID replacement space, but also in this new cohort-based model, and we're going to learn what performs. It's going to be a very interesting year or two, I would say.
So you talked about testing and learning. You talked about multiple solutions. You also talked about interoperability. How does all of that translate into the TV and video measurement space, particularly with this notion of a common currency?
Yeah, so it's amazing, isn't it, that we have all of this action happening in these very different markets, but the commonality is about ID and measurement, right? So the situation in TV is quite different, and one thing that I always try to emphasize when I talk about this is that going from a panel, like what Nielsen has historically used, 80,000 Nielsen homes, that then gets modeled out into the 130 million households that we have in the US. Going from a panel of 80,000 homes to a big data set of like 20 million homes doesn't necessarily mean that your output will be more accurate. Because the devil, and you know this from your background, I think, the devil is in the details of how the modeling is done. If you're not adjusting for the skew in your underlying data set and correcting for it when you extrapolate out to that broader universe, you can have more data and less accuracy. And so that's why it's so critical that folks on the buy side, like people at Omnicom who are focusing on this, are able to critically evaluate each of these alternate currencies and say, like, okay, yeah, it's great. You've got all this licensed ACR data from, from Roku or Samsung or whichever OEM, right? But how accurate is your perception of the TV watching universe? And so that's where we are right now. So we're very much in a testing and learning phase with alternate currencies. Unlike some other agencies, we have not come out and said, XYZ% of our upfront spend is going to be in these alternate currencies, because we don't think it's nearly mature enough for us to want to make a statement like that. So 2022 is very much a testing and evaluation year. 2023, we'll see which of these gain traction. And then the other thing to remember, and I think some people are counting Nielsen out, but Nielsen is very much in this game, and they're not just standing still with their legacy panel-based approach. They're augmenting it into something called Nielsen One. So they're trying to combine the best of both worlds: big data sets that are gathered with that are based on ACR collection from OEMs, combined with the panel as a way of calibrating that big data set. That may yet prove out to be the best solution. Nobody knows yet. It's too early. So it's a very exciting time, and we're going to keep our clients updated as we continue to learn more.
Thank you so much.